The folder hit the desk like a gunshot. Coffee erupted from the cup, porcelain, white, expensive, the kind of cup an intelligence chief drinks from when he thinks he's winning a war. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris didn't move. He just watched the dark liquid spread across papers that could get him hanged. Intelligence reports. Classified. The kind that if the Gestapo found them, would mean a noose and a meat hook. But it wasn't the Gestapo he feared. Right now, it was the numbers. March 17, 1943, Berlin, the heart of the Reich. Outside the windows of Abwehr headquarters, the Landwehr Canal flowed cold and dark. 24 years ago, they'd dumped Rosa Luxemburg's body in those waters. Now Canaris sat in that same city, holding intelligence that would drown the Third Reich just as surely. The report said one thing, just one impossible thing. Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant was building a front-engine B-24 Liberator bomber every single hour. Canaris stared at the words. Read them again, then again. One bomber, every hour, every 60 minutes, all day, all night. The B-24 Liberator wasn't a bicycle. It was a flying fortress. 1.5 million individual parts, 450,000 rivets, 30,000 separate components, an 18-ton machine that could carry death across an ocean. And the Americans were stamping them out faster than Germany could build a simple military truck. Impossible. That's what Canaris whispered, that single word, impossible. Major Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz stood at attention across the desk, rigid, professional, terrified. He'd triple-checked the intelligence. He'd verified every source. He'd done his job. The numbers didn't change. What neither man understood in that moment, what they couldn't possibly grasp, was that this wasn't just bad intelligence. This was the beginning of the end, the systematic collapse of German understanding, the fatal miscalculation that would doom millions. They were staring at mathematical inevitability, and they had no idea. The failure had started 2 years earlier, quietly, almost gently, like a crack in a dam that nobody notices until the flood. 1941, General Karl Koller of the Luftwaffe had walked into Hermann Göring's office, carrying reports from Washington. The German military attaché General Friedrich von Bodecher had sent detailed assessments. American aircraft production was approaching 2,000 planes per month. Göring had laughed, not a polite chuckle, a full belly-shaking laugh, the kind of laugh that ends careers. Americans, Göring had said, wiping tears from his eyes. Americans can build refrigerators. They can build razor blades. They cannot build military aircraft. For days after Pearl Harbor, Göring stood in Hitler's Wolfslair headquarters. Snow falling outside, maps of a conquered Europe spread across the tables. And Göring had made his pronouncement with absolute confidence. The Americans are bluffing. Their democracy makes them weak. Their mongrel population makes them inefficient. Their Jews make them corrupt. They cannot possibly produce what they claim. Hitler had nodded, believed, smiled. By March 1943, that smile had become a death sentence. German intelligence networks across the Americas were screaming the same message. Different sources, different countries, different methods, all reporting the same impossible truth. Mexican industrialists, sympathetic to the Reich, Spanish diplomats traveling through neutral channels, Swedish businessmen touring Detroit, even intercepted letters from American factory workers to relatives in Argentina. They all said it. The same thing. Over and over, Ford's Willow Run plant was producing more heavy bombers than every German aircraft factory combined. Not just more, exponentially more. Oberstleutnant Nikolaus Ritter sat in his office, surrounded by reports. Head of the Abwehr's Air Intelligence Section, a former Lufthansa pilot who'd lived in America for 10 years before the war. He understood Americans in ways most German officers couldn't. He'd lived in Manhattan in the 1920s. His apartment had overlooked the construction of the Chrysler Building. He'd watched them erect the world's tallest building in less than 2 years. Watched steel rise into the sky at impossible speed. Watched Americans do what Europeans said couldn't be done. Now he was reading reports that made that construction project look slow. Ritter drafted his assessment carefully. Every word weighed, every sentence a potential death warrant. Herr Admiral, he wrote to Canaris, if these numbers are accurate, and I believe they are, then Germany has already lost this war. It is now simply a question of mathematics. In time, the intelligence came through routes more twisted than the canals of Venice. Each one dangerous, each one vital. Georg Nikolaus ran the Abwehr's primary network in Mexico City. He'd cultivated sources among American businessmen who moved freely between Detroit's factories and Mexico's oil fields. These men talked, over drinks, over dinner, never thinking their casual conversations would be transcribed by German agents and sent to Berlin in coded diplomatic pouches. February 3, 1943. The German-Mexican Commerce Association hosted a reception. Crystal glasses, expensive liquor, men in suits talking business. Harold Morrison was there, an American oil executive, 3 tequilas deep and feeling expansive. He'd just toured the Willow Run facility. Ford had arranged it, wanted to show potential investors what American industry could accomplish. Morrison started talking. And talking, and talking. Wolfgang Blau listened, smiled, nodded, played his part as an Argentine leather merchant to perfection. But inside his head, he was memorizing every word, every detail, every impossible claim. "Gentlemen," Morrison said, leaning forward like he was sharing the secret to eternal life, "what I saw defies description. The assembly line is over a mile long. A mile. The building is so vast that clouds form inside it. Actual clouds. It sometimes rains inside the factory." Men laughed, thought he was exaggerating, the way Americans do. But Morrison wasn't finished. 42,000 workers, he continued, including thousands of women, Negro women, building the most complex machine ever created. Building bombers. He pulled out a pencil, started sketching on a cocktail napkin. Right there, at the bar. To Bombay. 4,000 pounds of ordnance each. For engines, 1,200 horsepower per engine. They build them in sections. Sub-assemblies, Ford calls them. Everything converges like rivers flowing into the sea. Blau asked his question carefully, skeptically, playing the role. But surely such complexity means delays, breakdowns, production problems. Morrison laughed again. That's what Consolidated Aircraft thought. They mocked Ford, said you can't build planes like cars. But Ford broke the bomber down into 60,000 separate operations. 60,000, each worker performs the same task. Over and over, perfection through repetition. He leaned in closer, whispered like it was a secret, a woman who was making breakfast for her children. Last month is now installing hydraulic lines in the tail section. They train them in days, not months, days. The intelligence flowed from other directions, to each stream adding to the flood. Colonel Jose Ungria served as Spain's military attaché in Washington, officially neutral, secretly feeding intelligence to Germany in exchange for tungsten shipments that kept Spanish industry alive. Franco played both sides. Ungria was his instrument. March 1943, a reception at the Argentine embassy. Champagne, diplomats, small talk masking larger games. Charles Sorensen attended, Ford's production chief, the architect of Willow Run, the man who'd taken Henry Ford's vision and turned it into reality. Ungria engaged him in conversation. Professional interest, he claimed, military engineer, to industrial genius. Sorensen, proud of his achievement and believing he was talking to a neutral nation that might buy aircraft after the war, spoke freely. Too freely, Colonel Sorensen said, swirling his champagne. When I first visited Consolidated San Diego plant in 1940, they were building B-24s outdoors, in the sunshine, each one different from the last, taking 180,000 man-hours per aircraft. I knew we could do better. How much better? Ungria asked. Sorensen smiled. I spent one night in my hotel room sketching the entire production flow. One night, we would build bombers like we build cars, not by having workers swarm over a stationary aircraft, by moving the aircraft past stationary workers, each person performing specific tasks, repeatedly, achieving perfection. But the workforce, Ungria pressed, such complexity. We built an apprentice school, Sorensen interrupted, trains 8,000 workers weekly. Women comprise 40% of our workforce. They're actually better at detailed work, smaller hands for tight spaces, more patience for repetitive tasks. He paused. Let that sink in. We have Negro workers operating sophisticated machinery, boys of 16 managing supply logistics. Democracy means utilizing all available human resources. Colonel, all of them. Every word was transmitted to Berlin within 2 weeks. Every detail recorded. Every impossible claim verified by other sources. Swedish engineers visited and confirmed it. Japanese attaches saw it and reported it to Tokyo. The Germans intercepted those reports too. Turkish diplomats, Argentine businessmen, Swiss bankers. All saying the same thing. By April 1943, German intelligence had assembled data from 17 independent sources, 17, all confirming the same production rate, all reporting the same impossible truth. Willow Run alone was producing 650 B-24s monthly at peak capacity. The entire American B-24 production exceeded 1,400 per month. Desperate for ground truth, for physical proof that couldn't be dismissed, Canaris authorized Operation Pastorius, the insertion of saboteurs into the United States via submarine. Their mission, sabotage. Their secret orders, gather intelligence first. George John Dosh lead one team. For men, all had lived in America. All spoke perfect English. All knew what they were looking for. Early morning, June 13, 1942. Amagansett, Long Island. The coast dark. The submarine surfacing just beyond the breakers. For men in a raft, coming ashore after midnight. Within days, Dosh surrendered to the FBI. Not out of patriotism to America. Not out of cowardice. But out of understanding, he'd seen the truth. And the truth terrified him more than any prison cell. During his interrogation, Dosh told FBI Special Agent Charles Landman something that stunned his captors. Canaris himself told me that Berlin doesn't believe your production figures. They think Willow Run is propaganda. He wanted photographs, employee counts, shipping records, proof that would force Gring to accept reality. Landman asked incredulously. They don't believe we're producing a bomber an hour. Dosh laughed, bitter, exhausted. Agent Landman, I lived here. I've seen your automobile factories. I tried to tell them, if Ford could produce a car every minute before the war, they could certainly produce a bomber every hour during it. He paused. Let the silence stretch. They accused me of defeatism. April 20th, 1943, Hitler's 54th birthday. Karinhal Gring's hunting estate north of Berlin. Ostentatious doesn't begin to describe it. Art stolen from across Europe, hunting trophies from extinct species. A monument to excess. Canaris arrived carrying a briefcase full of truth. Photographs, intercepted documents, reports from dozens of sources. Everything spread across Gring's massive oak table like cards in a losing hand. Herr Reichsmarschall Canaris began carefully, every word measured. We have confirmation from 17 independent sources. The Ford Willow Run plant is producing one B-24 Liberator every hour at peak production. They've achieved this rate consistently since January. Gring picked up one photograph, the assembly line stretching into the distance, aircraft visible at every station. He weighed over 280 pounds by this point. The morphine addiction was showing. The corruption of power and defeat was eating him from inside. He looked at Canaris with contempt. Do you take me for a fool? Gring said. These are obviously wooden mock props for propaganda. The Americans want us to believe they can build aircraft like sausages. This Willow Run plant probably produces 50 bombers monthly. At most, Canaris pulled out another document, an intercepted manifest from the Pennsylvania Railroad. Aluminum shipments, tons and tons of aluminum. Herr Reichsmarschall, they're consuming 16 million pounds of aluminum monthly at this one plant. That's more than our entire monthly production. Gring laughed. A harsh, dismissive sound. Then where do they get this aluminum? From their Negro workers, from their women riveters. Canaris, you've been deceived by American propaganda. 1 week later, Canaris was summoned to the Wolf's Lair to brief Hitler personally. The room was crowded. Generals Jodl and Keitel, Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels, Hitler studying maps of the Eastern Front. Operation Citadel was being planned. The Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history. Hitler's attention was elsewhere. Mein Führer, Canaris said, knowing he was risking everything. If the Americans are producing 1,400 B-24s monthly, plus equal numbers of B-17s, plus their fighter aircraft, plus British production, the aerial bombardment of the Reich will soon exceed our defensive capabilities. Hitler's response was immediate, characteristic, absolute. Admiral, the Americans are capable of mass production of simple goods, automobiles, refrigerators, but a bomber is not a car. It requires precision, skill, dedication. They claim to have achieved in 16 months what took us 6 years to prepare. It's impossible. General Jodl studied the figures, made a calculation. Even if we accept 1/4 of these figures as accurate, the figures are false. Hitler interrupted, his voice cold. Final. The Americans entered the war in December 1941. Building this miraculous factory and achieving this production in such time is impossible. But Canaris had one more card to play. One final piece of evidence. Film footage, obtained through Swiss intelligence contacts. 5 minutes of the Willow Run assembly line in full operation. Smuggled via Spanish diplomatic pouches, real, undeniable. Canaris and his deputy, Hans Oster, watched the film in a locked room. Just the two of them, the projector clicking, the images flickering on the wall. The camera traveled the entire mile-long assembly line. B-24s in every stage of construction. Moving, always moving. Workers everywhere. Men, women, black, white, all performing tasks with mechanical precision. A clock was visible in several shots, confirming the timing, proving the rate. My God, Oster whispered. It's true. Canaris didn't respond. He just pulled out his cigarette lighter and burned the film, watched it curl and blacken, and turned to ash. We cannot show this to them, he said quietly. They would accuse us of creating fake footage, or of being traitors. November 1943. Aerial photographs of Willow Run, taken by a Spanish diplomat on a commercial flight. High quality, detailed, clear. German photo analysts spent weeks studying them, measuring, calculating, confirming. Conclusions were precise, clinical, devastating. Lots contain approximately 12,000 cars. 3-shift operations, confirmed. Completed B-24s visible at adjacent airfield. 47 aircraft ready for delivery. Assembly line visible through skylights. Aircraft spaced exactly as human intelligence reported. Rail sightings show dozens of freight cars delivering materials. The recommendation was stark. Immediate strategic reassessment. Gring saw the photographs, dismissed them as clever American photographic manipulation, probably using scale models. Dr. Albert Speer was different. Hitler's armaments minister, the only Nazi leader with genuine understanding of industrial production. He'd been an architect. He understood buildings, factories, production capacity, mathematics. He secretly obtained the American intelligence, read it in private, made his own calculations. His diary entry for May 15, 1943, discovered after the war, reveals his despair in handwritten ink. If the Willow Run figures are even half accurate, we face not defeat but annihilation. They produce more aircraft in a month than we do in a year. But I cannot speak this truth. To do so would be my death warrant. Dr. Otto Ohlendorf ran the head of internal security, a trained economist, one of the few Nazi officials who understood numbers better than ideology. He analyzed American economic data, built models, made projections. His report to Himmler in December 1943 was mathematically precise and absolutely stark. The Ford Motor Company's peacetime production in 1941 was 1.1 million vehicles. They have converted this capacity to bomber production. At current rates, by June 1944, the Americans will have produced enough B-24s alone to drop our entire 1940 London bombing tonnage every single day. Christmas Eve, 1943. Canaris received the projections for American production estimates. The numbers rolled across the page like artillery fire. B-24 Liberators, 18,000, B-17 Flying Fortresses, 12,000, B-29 Super Fortresses, 1,000. Fighter aircraft, 40,000. Total, 86,000 aircraft in a single year. Response when presented these figures was predictable, expected, fatal. The Americans claim they will produce more aircraft in 1944 than all nations have produced in all of history. It's absurd. By February 1944, Canaris was removed from his position. Suspected of defeatism, suspected of treason, suspected of telling uncomfortable truths, his replacement was Walter Schott, a Nazi loyalist, a man who would never dare contradict Hitler or Göring, a man who understood that survival meant believing what you were told to believe. But reality doesn't negotiate. Reality doesn't care about ideology. Reality doesn't bend to wishful thinking. February 20th, 1944, big week. Operation Argument. The American 8th Air Force launched over 1,000 heavy bombers against German aircraft factories. 1,000 in a single formation. In 6 days, they dropped more bomb tonnage than the Luftwaffe had dropped on Britain during the entire Blitz. Luftwaffe. Fighter pilot Adolf Galland stood in Göring's office and said it plainly. Herr Reichs, I've counted over 800 bombers in a single formation. These planes are real. They're dropping real bombs. They're killing real Germans. June 6, 1944. D-Day, over 11,000 Allied aircraft appeared over France. 11,000, the Luftwaffe could muster fewer than 300 fighters in response. Marshal Hugo Sparrow sent a desperate message to Berlin. The kind of message men send when they know it's too late, when all that's left is acknowledgement of reality. The enemy's aerial superiority is absolute. Our intelligence was correct. We were deceived, not by the Americans, but by ourselves. April 1944. Willow Run achieved its peak production rate. The numbers were recorded, verified, undeniable. That month, 42,331 employees working to 9-hour shifts, 6 days a week, produced 453 airplanes in 468 hours. One finished B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes. The workforce breakdown would have shattered Nazi racial ideology completely. If they'd believed it, if they'd allowed themselves to see it. 11,000 women, 26% of the workforce, 3,800 African Americans, 9% of the workforce, 1,200 disabled workers, 3% of the workforce. The inferior races and weaker sexes were outproducing the German master race by orders of magnitude, building the machines that would destroy the Reich, driving every rivet, installing every wire, testing every engine, and doing it faster than Germany could build a truck. After the war, when the reckoning came, surviving German intelligence officers revealed the full scope of the failure. The trials, the interrogations, the documentation of catastrophe. Walter Schellenberg testified at Nuremberg, his voice flat, defeated. We knew the truth about American production by early Every professional intelligence officer understood the numbers were accurate, but to report this truth was to risk execution for defeatism. Hans-Bernd Gisevius wrote in his memoirs, the words bitter with hindsight. The tragedy was not that we lacked intelligence about American production. We were drowning in it. The tragedy was that our leadership refused to believe it because it contradicted their racial ideology. The German intelligence officers who tried to report the truth paid the ultimate price. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, executed April 9, 1945, at Flossenburg concentration camp, hanged. His crime, telling the truth. Hans Oster, executed April 9, 1945, at Flossenburg concentration camp. Same day, same crime. Alexis von Rohen, executed October 1944 for involvement in the July 20th plot. Another truth-teller, another casualty of reality. Hans-Bernd Gisevius escaped to Switzerland, survived the war, lived to write the history the others couldn't. The The United States Strategic Bombing Survey confirmed. After the war, what German intelligence had reported in 1940-3. Willow Run produced 8,685 B-24s between 1942 and 19. Peak production, 650 aircraft monthly. The hourly rate sustained for months. Total cost per aircraft dropped from $238,000 to $137,000. Albert Speer was interrogated after the war. Asked the question directly, why didn't Germany believe the intelligence about American production? His answer was simple, honest, devastating. 2. Accept that. Ford could produce a bomber. Every hour was to accept that our entire worldview was wrong. That democracy wasn't weak, but strong. That racial mixing didn't create weakness, but strength. That women could do men's work. That ideology was a lie. It would mean accepting that we had started a war we could never win. Who would tell Hitler that? Who would dare? Roswell Monroe operated a rivet gun on the B-24 production line. The real-life inspiration for Rosie the Riveter. She and thousands of women like her had never worked in industry before Pearl Harbor, housewives, mothers, secretaries, teachers. Now they were building bombers. We knew we were building something important, Monroe said in a 1984 interview. Her voice still strong, still proud. Every rivet we drove was going to help end the war. We worked double shifts sometimes, sleeping in the parking lot between shifts. We had brothers, husbands, sweethearts flying these planes, flying them into hell. We weren't going to let them down. The failure to believe the intelligence about Willow Run had cascading consequences, each miscalculation spawning another, each error compounding into catastrophe. Fighter production continued when bombers were needed, resources wasted on wonder weapons instead of practical defenses, operations planned for facing hundreds of bombers when thousands were coming, peace overtures delayed because leadership didn't understand certain defeat was certain. German economists, analyzing captured documents after the war, realized the true scale of the mistake. Willow Run cost $200 million. Germany's entire aircraft industry investment from 1933 to 1945, $400 million equivalent. Willow Run floor space, 3.5 million square feet. All German aircraft factories combined, 8 million square feet. Willow Run electrical consumption, 2.5 million kilowatts monthly. The Americans had built a single factory consuming more resources than entire German cities, and they'd done it in less than 2 years. By war's end, the full accounting was complete. The numbers final. The verdict rendered. Total B-24s produced 8. Willow Run built 8,685. Total B-17s produced 12,731. Total. American aircraft produced 1945, 330,117. Total. German aircraft produced 1940 to 1945, 94,700. The United States produced 3.2 times more aircraft than Germany, while fighting a two-ocean war, while building ships, while building tanks, while feeding Britain and Russia, while creating the atomic bomb. Democracy wasn't weak. It was overwhelming. Historians now call the German intelligence failure regarding American production one of the most consequential in military history. Not a failure of collection. They gathered accurate, detailed intelligence. A failure of acceptance, leadership refusing to believe intelligence that contradicted their worldview. Dr. Gerhard Weinberg concluded in his analysis. German intelligence accurately assessed American production capacity by early 19. Had this intelligence been believed and acted upon, Germany might have sought peace 2 years earlier, saving millions of lives. The story carries lessons that echo across time. Cognitive bias. Accurate intelligence can be rejected if it contradicts core beliefs. Ideological blindness. Political ideology can override mathematical reality. Systemic failure. Intelligence systems that punish unwelcome truth receive comfortable lies instead. Fatal miscalculation. Underestimating opponents leads to catastrophic errors. At the 1985 dedication of the Yankee Air Museum at Willow Run, former Rosie the Riveter, Roswell Monroe, met former Luftwaffe pilot Hans Ulrich Rudel, the most decorated German pilot of the war. A man who'd flown over 2,000 combat missions, seen the endless stream of American bombers darkening the sky. He asked her directly, "How did you build so many so fast?" Monroe smiled. "Honey, we just went to work every day and did our job. Nothing fancy. Punch in, build bombers, punch out. Democracy isn't complicated. It's just free people doing their best." Rudel was quiet for a moment, then responded, "We were told democracy made you weak, that your diversity made you inefficient. We were told lies. And those lies killed millions. In the ruins of Berlin, May 1945, American intelligence officers discovered a final German intelligence report on Willow Run, dated April 20th, 19. Hitler's last birthday. The words were typed neatly, professionally. Each sentence, a epitaph. Willow Run, production confirmed. We reported this truth 2 years ago. We were not believed. Germany dies, not from lack of intelligence, but from lack of wisdom to believe intelligence that contradicts what we wish to be true. Let future generations learn. Reality does not bend to ideology. Mathematics does not yield to mythology. Truth ignored becomes tragedy. The report was never delivered. By then, Hitler was in his bunker. Days from suicide. The 1,000-year Reich had days to live. And thousands of American bombers, many built at Willow Run, continued delivering the final argument German intelligence had tried to make 2 years earlier. The verdict of history is clear, unambiguous. Final. German intelligence was excellent. German intelligence acceptance was catastrophic. In that failure to believe uncomfortable truths lies a warning for all nations, all leaders, all people who think reality bends to belief. Reality doesn't care what you believe. Those who deny reality in favor of ideology will ultimately be destroyed by it. Not eventually, not maybe. Destroyed. Willow Run built more than bombers. It built proof that democracy works, that diversity strengthens, that freedom produces, that women are capable, that race is a lie, that ideology is weakness pretending to be strength. German spies counted them all. Every bomber, every worker, every rivet. German leaders believed none of it. And that disbelief killed the Third Reich as surely as any bomb that ever fell from those aircraft. The guns fell silent over Germany in May 9, but the lesson still speaks across the decades, still whispers in the wind that blows across Willow Run's empty floors. Reality wins. Always, eventually. Absolutely. The only question is how much it costs to learn that lesson. For Germany, the price was everything.